episode of All Things Ghostly. My name is Abbie. Welcome if you've never been here before, and welcome back if you have. Nice to see you again. So, today's episode is going to be all about symbols of death. Now, I just urge you guys to not take any of these too seriously. Obviously, all throughout the world of spiritualness and spirituality, there's tons of symbols and stuff like that to represent different things. So, if you see these things, don't think you're definitely gonna die. Don't take them too seriously. Obviously this can be significant to some people and maybe not others. It doesn't necessarily mean it has to be death for you. I don't think it might just be death from a person who has already passed on, or maybe an elderly relative or friend or whoever. Sorry, I just banged my table. That might be reaching the end of their life, but I just thought that this was an interesting topic. Because it can also be very creepy, obviously, and unsettling to see these signs and be thinking to yourself, oh my gosh, am I going to die? Probably not. Again, don't take it too seriously, but I just think that this is a really interesting topic. And I did find an article. As always, it will be linked in any description box of wherever you're watching or listening. And it is called 22 Symbols of Death from Ancient and Modern Cultures. So, again, just an interesting topic. I don't want anybody listening to this episode and then seeing our first one is I think a raven, yeah, and thinking they're gonna die, because that's not true. But again, just something interesting to chat about and a little bit gruesome as well. So it starts out by saying, throughout history, the human mind has tried to understand death. When words fail, symbols are used to describe and understand death. Death can be symbolized by hundreds of symbols. Despite the differences between these symbols, collectively they reveal insights into death's meaning. Sometimes these symbols are an omen of death, while other death symbols are simply indicative of a death that has already occurred. When you're looking at these symbols of death, you'll want to pay specific attention to symbols that come from your culture and heritage's belief, since these will energetically match your own life. Most of these symbols are death from ancient cultures, so they have a lot of energetic meanings attached to them. Read on to learn more about the common symbols of death and why they symbolize the ultimate rest. So, like I said, the first one is the raven, which is very Edgar Allan Poe, so that makes a lot of sense. Ravens are associated with death in many cultures, especially in the aftermath of a bloody or significant battle. Ravens are often seen in pairs and are usually used as messengers of bad news, usually announcing the death of a hero, at least in ancient mythology. Yes, they convey a deeper meaning than mere carrying and eating. Carrion? I don't know what that means. They also possess a gifted sense of prophecy. So sometimes the raven is a prophetical symbol of death, while other times the raven just shows us what we already know, appearing after battles at cemeteries and in other death-related areas. While ravens are well-known death symbols throughout time, they also have many other positive significances, so really it depends on the circumstances. So it said ravens are normally seen in pairs, and I feel like I have the opposite experience where I see a single raven most of the time. So again, everybody's always going to have a different experience, and as this just said, ravens can mean other things too. So symbols are very up to interpretation. You can have so many different interpretations of a symbol, and you just kind of have to pinpoint it to what is significant in your current life and your current beliefs and what message you are being sent from these symbols. So the next sign, similar to ravens, are vultures. In the spirit world, I'm getting a pop-up saying for me to sign up for an email. I don't want to do that. Anyway, the perks of these websites, I swear something's always popping up on me. In the spirit world, vultures are seen as messengers between life and death. Because they circle waiting for something to die and then swoop in to get it, they represent impending death. The Mayans believed that the vultures were a symbol of transformation. As they eat the dead body, the spirit is transformed. So you can see that vultures as a symbol of death aren't all bad. Cypress trees. Cypress trees have been a symbol of mourning since ancient times. Until modern times, these trees dominated both Muslim and European cemeteries. The Bible mentions cypress trees as a symbol of death. They are good plants to represent death because they because they represent evergreens and hence everlasting life. So in some ways, the cypress tree represents the soul after death. The cypress tree is also a symbol of Hades, Greek god of the underworld, because the aromatic branches are used to mask the smell of death, so the tree became sacred to this major god. Next up, we have candles. Candles represent the light of the next world. Additionally, they are a symbol of Christ as the guiding light of salvation. Although they symbolize death, they also symbolize hope. Latin Americans believe that lighting these candles on certain days of the year brings them closer to their departed loved ones. Thus, candles can be associated with mourning, remembering, and death. Candles can be used in both religious and cultural rituals, such as lighting a candle for the deceased to reduce the gap between the living and the dead. Tombstones. Tombstones themselves are symbols of death. Often used as grave markers, the stones indicate the location of graves. Their presence is a memorial. Usually made of stone, these monuments preserve the memory of the deceased after their death. Some cultures also believe that the soul has a unique tie to the stone. Regarding of whether or not you believe in souls, tombstones are one of the most obvious death symbols today. Agreed. Obviously, cemeteries are full of them, symbolizing a passed on person. Okay, and then we have bats. Western cultures typically associate bats with death and destruction due to their perceived unclean status. However, Eastern cultures actually see bats as a sign of good fortune. Bats definitely aren't one of the ancient symbols of death, but have more recently been associated with the afterlife, and not in a good way. Are bats seen as like dirty creatures? I figured obviously a lot of people are afraid of them, but I didn't know they were seen as like unclean. I feel like, I don't know. I don't think I've ever heard of that. So that's a little bit interesting. Early Christians believed bats to be evil and representatives of Dracula, which makes a little more sense now because, obviously bats and vampires are heavily associated. A bloodthirsty vampire, so bats represented the worst kind of death, the sort where you couldn't fully die. Some Christians also felt that bats represented demons due to their demon-like wings versus angel wings. What type of death do you have where you can't fully die other than if somebody gets into a car accident and then they flatline but then they're brought back? What other types of death can't you fully die from though? The next symbol, I think, is a hyacinth. I think it's a flower. In ancient Greek lore, Hyacinthus, I think, is accidentally killed by Apollo. So it's not a flower, it's a person originally. But then it says, and from his blood grows the hyacinth flower. So it is a flower. Okay, glad we're caught up. Now, hyacinth flowers still represent symbols of death in various different cultures, mostly stemming from different versions of this ancient mythology. While hyacinth is one of the well-known symbols of death, it is also a symbol of everlasting love, especially for those who have passed on. So again, as you can see, a lot of these symbols, although they mean death, there's also something else to them. And honestly, so far, they're quite the opposite of death. So this one is death and love. So everlasting love. So ooh, I like this one. Black butterflies. So mysterious. Black butterflies are usually associated with death and are considered unlucky. Why? They're so beautiful. I love them. They are also symbolic of rebirth and death in some cultures and are of the most ancient symbols of death. Typically, butterflies come in a variety of colors, but black butterflies are uncommon. Black butterflies are often regarded as ominous and cryptic symbols of death and misfortune in many cultures. Black butterflies may indicate the death of a loved one if they hover around or land on your skin. A black butterfly or moth inside one's house can also be a sign that a beloved one has died. Additionally, some Celtic and Irish myths associated black butterflies with the souls of the dead who were unable to move on to the next life. In other cultures, black butterflies are associated with witchcraft. So I guess in this instance, black moths are also categorized into this as well. So black moths or black butterflies, I guess, is unlucky, but I think they're gorgeous. The next symbol is clocks, which, how can you escape saying a clock? You can't. They're everywhere, which is why I'm saying, do not think you are going to die if you see one of these things. I just can't reiterate that enough, because I know that if I had just freshly heard about like these death symbols, and let's say I saw a clock, I would be fully convinced that I was about to die. So I'm just saying, you're not about to die. You're okay. Love you. Anyway, symbols of death include clocks, grandfather clocks, and other timepieces. The clock is regarded as a symbol of death because it measures the time we have left on Earth. That is a mindfuck to think about. I don't like that. It is a symbol of mortality. Time symbolizes the cycle of life in every way. Death is symbolized by both a physical and symbolic clock. Time is important when it comes to death, especially in ancient lore. Death is not random, but often draws closer based on the time of the clock. The macabre is more real at night, especially at midnight. Life stops when the clock stops, at least metaphorically, so clocks are one of the symbols of death in more ways than just the physical. One of the most recognizable time-related symbols of death is the hourglass. When an hourglass is turned upside down, the grains of sand eventually run out, symbolizing death. Isn't that in like the Wizard of Oz where Dorothy is like locked up and she has by the end of the hourglass, like, you know, running out from one side until like the witch kills her? Anyway, other common time-related symbols of death are ancient sundials. Sunrise marks the beginning of time, but nightfall is a symbol of death's darkness. The next one I'm not 100% sure how to pronounce. I think it's a scythe, S-C-Y-T-H-E. Death, aka the Grim Reaper, is often shown holding a scythe. I'm almost sure that's how it's pronounced, but again, I'm not looking it up, so sorry about it. A curved, sharp blade at the end of a long handle, which he uses to cut down the living. These images are derived from pagan harvest rituals. So it's literally just his little, like, knife guy that he's holding all the time. Then we have crows, which again is a very common, I think, symbol of death that we all pretty much know. Crows were considered an omen of death in ancient times. They were also linked to the occult. They are regarded as bad omens, just as most blackbirds and carrion birds. Carrion birds? There's that word again. So I guess it's a type of bird. Oh, it says birds that feed on dead flesh. Of their own or of others? Like other species? I don't know. According to some folklore, the appearance of a crow could be a sign of a hero's death. So isn't that the same as the raven? I could be mistaking that, but anyway, according to Native American tradition, crows symbolize death. In Native American folklore, however, the crow is also described as a trickster. They are seen as messengers who can connect this world with the next. A crow often represents the gods or goddesses in ancient Rome who were shapeshifters. Crows are often associated with negative events, particularly when they represented death. Furthermore, Romans used different animals to predict the future, and the crow was an omen of murder. The Morrigan, the Celtic goddess, transformed into a crow and often appeared at or before battles. The Morrigan shapeshifts into a raven in some versions of the story. The Celts believed that the crow symbolized death because the Morrigan is a death omen. In much the same way as blackbirds, crows can represent metaphysical death, the end of one era, and the beginning of another. Chrysanthemums, which is a flower that I'm familiar with, that I just know of. I'm not like a chrysanthemum enthusiast, but I've heard of it. Anyway, roses are a universal symbol of love, and chrysanthemums are a symbol of death, grief, and mourning in many European countries. White chrysanthemums are traditionally associated with grief, adversity, and sadness in Asian countries. As they survive the winter frost, they also symbolize immortality. So a lot of these death symbols I'm finding also represent that it's not only death, but it's death that continues on, like the soul continues, if you will. Like the one about endless love that, you know, never stops. They die, but there's still, the love is still continuing. And with this one, like you die, but immortality in the sense that you last afterward. So again, we're seeing a lot of patterns, I guess you could say. Lilies is the next one. So a lot of these symbols are very similar. Like obviously we have all the flowers, and then we had the crow and the raven, the vulture. I feel like they're all pretty similar because they're different forms of the same thing. So it's pretty consistent in like the logic of why it represents death is what I'm essentially saying. So, in a funeral setting, lilies represent a soul that has been restored to innocence after death. Ancient Egyptians believed that lilies were sacred, so it's no wonder that they're one of the most revered symbols of death. White lilies signify a rejuvenation of the soul and are popular both for weddings and funerals. They can symbolize purity, commitment, and rebirth, which is why they're often used as sympathy flowers. In fact, lilies are some of the most widely accepted symbols of death. There's a reason why Harry Potter's mother is named Lily. Of course, we gotta bring Harry Potter into this. The word signifies death, certainly, but it also is a sacred symbol of the purest kind of death. Also, I would just like to say, I'm not a Harry Potter hater, but I'm just not a fan. So I wasn't making fun of Harry Potter. I know there's a lot of Potterheads out there. But yeah, no hate toward the Potter community. And then we have the Banshee, which honestly, I don't know if I'm going to do a whole episode about this, but Banshees fascinate me, I feel like. They're just absolutely scary, to say the least. In ancient Celtic, Irish, and Scottish lore, a banshee is a type of fae creature who forewarns men and women of the time of their death. You will see her as a young woman, a stately matron, or a rattled old hag. Her way of announcing a death is by wearing a gray cloak and moaning. The Celts believed that if they hear a banshee crying, wailing, screaming, or keening, a relative would soon die. I'm not sure what keening is, to be honest. But I've always heard that banshees, and I'm sure, again, the lore differs from place to place, but I've always heard that banshees is a woman who died, like, betrayed, or, like, again, just in a bad way, essentially. And so she screams at people after death because she, like, died in a tragic way or something. Anyway, the color black is also generally just a symbol of death, I guess. Death is symbolized most powerfully by the color black. When you die, any light you had in your life ceases to exist, at least in the physical body. Black most closely represents death because the light is literally snuffed out. In contrast to white, which symbolizes innocence and light, black represents endings. This color, or absence of color, and the decay and darkness that it represents are common in the art world. Throughout history, black has been used as a symbol of death, nothingness, and the end of life in literature, movies, shows, poetry, music, and more. Black is the color of death and mourning in the West. The color black is associated with the underworld and evil. Queen Victoria shunned bright jewelry after the death of her husband Albert, when she favored jewelry made of jet and hard black stone that can be polished to a brilliant shine. Clothing plays an important role in representing death and mourning. Black clothing is often used to represent death. Families grieving the loss of a loved one have worn black for centuries to show that they are in mourning. In addition, the popular Grim Reaper from countless novels and movies wears a black robe when he comes with his scythe, I think, to take your soul. Death is certainly represented by black, which, just a little note here about wearing black to funerals. Y'all are gonna crack up. I literally wore black skinny jeans to my dad's funeral. I know. Don't talk to me about it. Anyway, sorry for that little side note. I just constantly think it's funny. Obviously, I was 16, almost 17, so I was just like, I'll just wear my skinny jeans. Don't accept it if you don't want to, but yeah. Anyway, the next symbol we have is the skull. Death being a symbol of the skull makes sense, literally. When a person's body decays, the skull is left behind. For centuries, burial techniques left bodies more vulnerable to Earth's elements, and as a result, skulls were readily visible in graveyards and other places. Occasionally, skulls are shown with crossbones that crisscrosses them, a symbol that came into being during the Middle Ages. These symbols of death were used by pirates and later to mark poison bottles. There are many examples of skulls in literature. As far back as William Shakespeare's writings, skulls have been symbolic of death. Hamlet is playing catch with skulls in a graveyard in Act 5. I'm not even gonna lie, I've never read, what is that play called? Is it Hamlet? Is it just called Hamlet? I've never read that, but that's fucked up. Why are you just playing catch with skulls? do something better with your time, my friend. Anyway, while he grieves for the loss of his father, he faces his own mortality, and he literally uses symbols of death to puzzle this out. Then we have flag at half-mast. Oh, that's what it is. There's a picture. It's like where it's not fully on top of the pole, the flag pole thing. It's like halfway down. It is a sign of mourning to fly the flag at half-mast, halfway up the flagpole. The space at the top of the flagpole is reserved for an invisible flag of death. Oh, that's interesting. I kind of just figured like halfway up means that you can't get to the top anymore because you're like dead. I don't know. But yeah, I guess that also makes sense to leave like a space for an invisible death flag, which what would that be? Like the skull and crossbones? I don't know. These don't have to make sense. They just have to be a thing somewhere in beliefs, I guess. Then we have the cross. For Christians, the cross represents eternal life and salvation. Before Christianity, however, the cross was an infamous symbol of torture, execution, and death. For an example, the Romans used it to crucify their criminals and outlaws. There were numerous ways that the Romans punished criminals, including stoning, strangling, and burning, but the most menacing punishment was the crucifixion. The cross is the world's most recognized symbol today. Oh no, I don't like this next one. White horses. I feel like they're so beautiful. But again, death doesn't always have to be like a bad thing, I guess. Like, obviously it is to lose a loved one, but I feel like we as a society really like to dread death, and that's obviously normal because you don't know what's after it. We can all, theorize, I guess you could say, and believe what we think is the truth, but we really don't know what happens after death. So I fully understand the negative association with death, but maybe some of these symbols are peaceful symbols, you know what I mean? Death is also peace for a lot of people as well. So if you're in misery and we always say they're in a better place or they've moved on without pain, or at least we hope they do. Obviously none of us can confirm that, but I feel like death should also be associated with peace sometimes, obviously not always, but in just like old age death situations where you naturally die, I think that it shouldn't be viewed as such a negative thing, but sad for sure, but also associated with peace from all the suffering that person has done on the earth while living. Alright, so for white horses it says, for centuries, cultures from around the world have revered white horses in mythology. In addition to their association with warrior heroes, saviors, and magic, they have also represented death and bad luck. There's a white horse for every unicorn and Pegasus, the first of the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. So it makes sense that people in the Midlands and southern counties of England are likely to spit over their left shoulder when confronted by a white horse. It is best to remain silent until you see a white horse, and Lincolnshire if you see a white dog. Okay, I've got a lot of questions here. So first of all, is it good luck to spit over your left shoulder or something? I don't know. Never heard of that one. And then it says, it is best to remain silent until you see a white horse if you see a white dog. So are white dogs... Oh, well, it says white animals appearing in Sussex at night are a sign of death. So you remain silent if you see a white animal until you see a white horse? But I thought the white horse was also bad luck. I don't know. Anyway, in other parts of the country, if you dream of a white horse, beware. That's a sign of doom. This sentiment traveled to the U.S., where hearses drawn by white horses signify imminent death in Maine. A pregnant woman in Newfoundland should avoid looking at one as much as possible, otherwise a difficult birth awaits. It may have something to do with the belief that the appearance of a white horse in your field meant you were about to ascend or descend, depending on your perspective, to a new celestial plane throughout history. See, I feel like, again, the white horse is so interesting to me because I've always associated white horses with, like, being very mystical and like, ooh, I'm so beautiful and rare of my kind, because I view like white horses as very rare for some reason. I had no idea where this like came from in my brain, but that's what I've always associated white horses with, just very like mystical and magical and beautiful. So to learn that it's like a symbol of death in a lot of places is actually pretty interesting. But the owl is the next symbol, which again, I feel like owls, for me, I associate them with like just nighttime, but I guess nighttime is associated with death. I don't know. Everything is associated with death. I feel like my brain is hurting from all of this. In many cultures, the owl is seen as an omen of death. It is said that the owl is an ominous presence in Native American mythology, with many tales of warnings about its appearance. It is often a symbol of death in Native American mythology. The owl is regarded as a symbol of death as well in many cultures around the world. The evening hooting of the owl is believed to be a warning of doom and death. Why? I feel like, again, an owl hoot, I don't know. I just don't associate it with doom. I don't associate it with a bad thing, I guess. I don't know. But my brain is apparently opposite to a lot of other people's in this regard. According to Aztec and Mayan folklore, the owl was a companion or messenger of the gods of death. I don't know. That one's interesting to me as well. Some of these things I can definitely get behind, like obviously wearing black to a funeral to represent mourning. Like, a lot of these do make sense to me. But I don't know. I don't know about the owl, the white horse. I don't know. Seems a little bit, but again, that just goes to show that depending on where you grew up and like what legends go around, like your beliefs and, stuff like that, you're gonna learn different things depending on that. So it's cool to broaden my horizons. We have 2 left. I know. Very sad. And one of those is an urn, which again, very obvious, like the tombstone. Duh. Urns were originally used as a repository for the ashes of the dead in ancient times, so they became symbols of death and mourning in ancient Greece. In several ancient drawings, it appears as if an angel is inspecting the contents. The urn may sometimes emit a sacred flame, indicating that life continues after death. Wait. Okay. Do you mean emit a flame unprovoked? Is that a thing? Like, that happens? I don't know. I feel like maybe it's like it doesn't say that somebody lights the sacred flame. It just says it may sometimes emit a sacred flame. Do we light on fire if we are burned? I mean, after the burning, though, because you're already in the urn, so that means you've already been burned. So the fire isn't from the little oven thing they gotta bake you in. My forehead is very shiny. The glow is intense today. Anyway, the last one is the 4th horseman, which I've heard of the 4 horsemen, but I don't know a ton about them. The 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. With their fiery personalities, the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse are found in the last book of the Christian Bible, the book of Revelation. Each horse and rider represents something different. Christ, or the Antichrist, rides the white horse, which symbolizes conquest. The red horse symbolizes war's bloodshed. Famine is symbolized by the black horse, which carries a balance scale. The 4th horse represents death itself. So the first horse is a white horse, which also symbolizes death. But then it said something about black butterflies, which could be, extended to just black animals, but then it said something about white animals. I don't know. Like I said, it seems like everything represents death at this point. It is also known as the pale horseman, which again is the 4th horse. The number 4 reflects the importance of 4 in the creation story, and at the end of the Bible in the book of Revelation, it symbolizes the end of the world. As a way to bring sense and peace to death's unyielding nature, these symbols gain popularity. Although death is inevitable, these are signs of hope in nature and in stories. From the familiar skull to the watchful eye of a raven, these images have earned their place in human history. We take steps towards accepting our own mortality by examining death's culture and symbolism. We don't have to let death stand in the way of living a full life, despite the fact that it is the great equalizer. So there we have it. Those are all of the symbols of death that is in this article, at least. Again, there's probably a shit ton more. I feel like in general, the overall consensus is that anything can be interpreted as literally anything, depending on, again, what resonates with you personally. So I feel like for me, as of lately, and this is always very interesting to me, even past like symbols of death, just symbols in general. I have been seeing the number 4 a lot lately, especially 444, which is an angel number. And I've looked into it and I can never remember like the meaning off the top of my head, but that is always so interesting to me when people say like, I've been seeing a lot of birds lately, I've been seeing a lot of roses lately. I just think that, again, it's something that you notice when you see something more often than you normally do. And it's cool that, you know, the universe or whatever God that you believe in or whatever you believe in at all is sending you messages in the way of like symbols and items and numbers and, you know, stuff like that. So yeah, it's definitely an interesting concept. So yes, I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. I feel like every time I go to end an episode, I play with my hair. Anyway, so let me know in the comments of this video on YouTube, or if you're listening to it, go to my Instagram or TikTok, which is Instagram at allthingsghostly and TikTok allthingsghostly podcast. Let me know if you've seen any symbols in your life as of recently, and what you think that they mean, because I'm sure like Googling what does it mean if I've seen like a cardinal or something like that a bunch, it probably brings up 1,000,001 different symbolization meanings, in my experience at least. Like I feel like for an example, when my dad died, I saw a lot of roses, which I actually have a rose tattoo. It's just a small one. But that has always kind of symbolized him to me, like his passing, because I saw a lot of roses. But I remember looking up what roses mean, and it was like 1,000,000 different things. So it's always 1,000,000 different things, because symbols are meant to, again, symbolize what is important to you at that moment, kind of things. So anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this episode, and I will definitely see you in my next one. I'm excited for some of the episodes that I'm going to be coming out with in the next couple of weeks here. I am definitely getting more used to the vibe of the podcast. Obviously, we're on like month 3, I think, or 4 of uploading episodes. This is like my 15th one, I think, which is crazy. Like I literally, I'm so thankful that this can be like an outlet for me, because obviously, you know, not everybody wants to hear about the spooky shit. So to have this outlet has definitely been very cool, and I'm enjoying it so much. So I hope that you guys are enjoying it as well. But yeah, I'm definitely excited for some of the things that are coming up. So you should be too. Make sure you subscribe if you're on YouTube. And keep on listening if you're on any other streaming platform. But yeah, like I said, I will see you guys in my next one. I hope you have a great night or day if you're listening in the morning. Great rest of your day, great tomorrow, great yesterday, you know, all the days. I hope they're great. So yes, I will see you guys next time, and yeah, bye, I guess. Just kidding. I love you guys. Goodbye.